I'm Dr. Francine Oputa. I direct the Cross-Cultural and Gender Center here on our campus. I'm also one of the co-vice chairs of the President's Commission on Human Relations and Equity. We want to welcome you all here today. Those of you who were here at 8 o'clock can attest that we had a magnificent panel. I was reminded of a pilgrimism that we got last night. Dr. Pilgrim said that if you're in a space where it takes courage to speak, then there's something wrong with the situation. And what I love is that we're doing something about the situation. That's what these are all about. That it does take courage to have these kinds of conversations. So I'm going to get on with my task. There are a few things on your chair we really want you to take note of. One is your Dogs United card. Dogs United is a project here on our campus that acknowledges individuals that go to diversity events and that go to events from groups other than their own. So make sure you fill this out. Also, if you haven't already, make sure that you go and see the exhibit, Sorting Out Race. The things that we're doing are in collaboration with the Henry Madden Library and the Diversity Committee, and they have this exhibit up now, right here on this floor. Also, there's an exhibit, Native Voices, which you'll find on the second floor and on the fourth floor. Did I get that right, Michelle? So please take advantage of these wonderful opportunities to learn. If you aren't aware, another courageous conversation that's happening on our campus every third Thursday, Conversations on Inclusion, Respect, and Equity. It's an opportunity for us to talk openly about what's going on well and where areas that we can improve on our campus and to look at actions that we can take. So every third Thursday, right now in USU 312. Also, experiencing this, our reflecting on our identities and stereotypes. If you want an opportunity to do work around looking at your biases, looking at stereotypes you have about groups, and helping to shift, please come to one of our NCBI Welcoming Diversity workshops. We offer them 3 times a semester, no charge to Fresno State student, faculty, and staff. We do usually 2 on Saturdays and 1 on a Friday. It's a full-day workshop, so each day repeats, so it's the same thing. Mary Lou Mendoza Miller is the Associate Vice President for Human Resources here at Fresno State. Mary Lou provides vision and strategic leadership for the planning and implementation of innovative, integrated human resources programs for our campus community of nearly 3,000 faculty and staff. Mary Lou earned her bachelor's in business administration with an option for human resources at Fresno State. She holds a designation as a certified senior professional in human resources. She serves as a member of our Commission on Human Relations and Equity, and she embraces the opportunity to contribute to the diversity and equity efforts of our campus. Mary Lou was raised in the small town of Layton here in the Central Valley. Her experience as a first-generation college student and passion for education inspired Mary Lou to become a servant leader in higher education administration and to be a role model and mentor for our students. Let's welcome Mary Lou out.
Good morning, everybody. Nice to see everybody. And I know some of you were here for our last panel and I'm really excited and I'm looking forward to hearing all of our panelists. I know it takes courage and just thank you in advance for that. And so let's go ahead and get started. First, I'd like to introduce our panelists. So let me start here. So we have Tiffany White. Tiffany is a crisis worker for Kings County. She earned her bachelor's in psychology from CSU Northridge and master's in counseling from Fresno State. Tiffany is currently working toward her doctorate in educational leadership here at Fresno State with Cohort 9. Welcome, Tiffany.
Thank you.
And also, we have our next panelist. We have Hira Sheikh. She's an undergraduate majoring in ASL interpreting, the Muslim Student Association Vice President, and Assistant Youth Coordinator of the Masjid Fresno Mosque. Thank you. And we have Jude Jackson. Jude is a biology major with a minor in chemistry and works at the Cross-Cultural and Gender Center under Gender Programs and Services. And we have John Yang. John is he's a graduate student in the Higher Education Administration and Leadership program. He earned his bachelor's in business management with a minor in economics at Fresno State and currently works as the program assistant for the Upward Bound program at Fresno City College. During his free time, John enjoys competitive tennis, traveling, and searching for hole-in-the-wall eateries. Nice. We'll have to connect later so you can give us some tips on where to go. Okay. So we're going to start off with our first question. And so my first question to our panelists is, how do you identify? So Tiffany, we'll start with you.
Oh, okay. I identify as a Black woman. Oh, can you guys hear me? Can you hear me? Also, I'm a singer. Just kidding. I mostly identify as a Black woman. It depends on the context, really, is how I identify. I identify as a Black woman because that's how people perceive me, and that's most of the conversations that I've expected to have. I also identify as Christian, cisgendered. I mean, depending on the conversation that we want to have, I have a lot of identifications. So that's it, mostly.
Thank you.
Hi. I identify as a Muslim woman, an American. I identify as a student, someone who's still learning. So there's so many parts, I think that it's so hard to identify yourself in one word or two words. But I think it's what you feel yourself, you feel are, in yourself. You feel that, you know what, this is me. This learning defines me. Being a Muslim, my faith defines me. The way the way that you choose to be, the way that you choose to dress, the way that you choose to speak, the things that you choose to say, I think that's what identifies me. What I do, what I wear, what I say, I think that identifies me.
Thank you.
Yeah, I also have a lot of identities. I mean, on the outside, people perceive me obviously as white, which is, definitely an identity. But beyond that, I identify as gay. I also identify as transgender. I am a transgender man. And I think those are the three things that I feel most encompass me, the three things I most love to talk about. Just being a part of the LGBT community.
Good morning, everyone. I mostly identify myself as a first-generation Hmong American, and oftentimes I'm kind of juggling between Hmong and American. So personally, I would say that I'm Hmong first, and I feel that Americanism about myself second.
Thank you all. Okay, so we all have biases, stereotypes, and misinformation about groups other than our own. Would you be willing to share a bias you have about a group other than your own and let us know? Where do you think that bias came from? And what is the work you are doing to shift your thinking about that group?
I have a lot of biases. I'm privileged in a lot of things, and I don't become aware of them until people tell me. I'm learning a lot about the Muslim community. My mentor is over there, Dr. Rahim, who has provided me with tons of information that I didn't know I was privileged as a Christian person. So I'm completely biased, and I don't know the stuff that, the biases that I have as a Christian person in America. I am also biased as a cisgendered person. I didn't understand before that, people automatically assume that you are heterosexual, which may not be the case all the time. So I have a ton of biases that I'm still learning about. So I open that up to everybody. If you are aware of a bias that I'm having, please educate me, because I don't know it unless you tell me. So that's it.
Kind of on the same footing there. So, I mean, there's a lot of the biases when somebody asks you if you have a bias, you want to immediately say no, you know. I'm not biased, but I think it's because you don't know that you're biased, right? You don't know about something about someone, or you don't know anything, and then you feel like you're not biased, but you are. So I think I'm still learning, and every single time I learn more things about a culture or a people or a faith, I learned that I was biased. So I think I can't think of anything in specific. I know that I started working with the deaf community after starting my major, and there was so much that you just assume about our deaf community that when I went in and I saw them and I saw how amazing they are, that I had to kind of, come out of that ignorance that I was in and realize that there was something. Every single culture has so much to give us. And I was realizing that I was holding myself back from being able to take advantage of that.
This was a really difficult question to think about, for sure. Being white, growing up in a conservative white family in a fairly white neighborhood, I grew up with a lot of biases that I didn't know. Even as a kid, I always felt like I didn't believe in stereotypes, that, I knew that people were different, but because of, the people I was surrounded by, of course, there's all these internal biases that I'm taking a lifetime to unlearn. I can't say any specifics because I honestly don't know. Like you were saying, I don't know any specific bias based on culture or race, but I know that they're ingrained in me based on the society that was built for people like me, racially at least, not so much with the gay and trans thing. But if I had to really narrow in on something, I do feel a bias against cisgender men. More as I feel unsafe, and it's something that I constantly have to work with. I know that not all cis 20-something-year-olds are not going to attack me for being trans or gay, but I always have that in me, and it's something I'm constantly trying to work toward, not to allow myself to think that way when I meet somebody, and also actually taking steps, working at the Cross-Cultural and Gender Center to help people relearn things so that they may not actually be aggressive anymore, kind of thing.
Yeah, I just want to echo what some of the other panelists have mentioned already. This is, for me personally, a very, very difficult question when I came across it, because it's not something that for myself, I feel is always in the forefront of my consciousness. And so I feel like I've been very privileged to grow up in a way where, because I grew up here in Fresno, and obviously for those that grew up here in Fresno, you kind of, I guess you take the diversity that you see within the K through 12 system for granted, and you don't realize that that's the case outside of Fresno. So even with that in mind, like I mentioned earlier in my introduction, I identify myself first as Hmong and then as American. And I feel that a lot of that has to do with the cultural expectations that are placed upon you within your family structure, that you are expected to uphold certain kinds of values and be a certain kind of person before you can be American, before you can be the majority that you see yourself around. And so for me, I guess my bias is towards those who are just purely being American. Because for me, I don't really know what that means. For me, I always take into consideration, my cultural values before before I adopt anything that's truly American. So that's kind of my bias there.
Okay. Thank you. So taking us back as you're reflecting on your own identity, what are some of the stereotypes that you have encountered within your identity group?
I feel like I should get up here and sing Beyonce. So one of the things that I have struggled with a lot, I grew up in Hanford, which is primarily white, hot, middle class. I was expected to speak for all Black people. I actually stopped going to my government class. My mom used to call in sick for me because I hated going, because I don't like speaking. Even now, I hate speaking on behalf of all Black women. I don't know what all Black women think. I can't speak for all of them. We're very different. I'm really radical in a lot of my opinions. I don't want to put that on any other Black woman. I know that as a Black doctoral student, I do represent, so I have to be very careful with a lot of the things that I say. As a therapist, I hate that. You know, I feel like we should be non-judgmental towards everyone, and I know that that's not realistic, but a lot of times I get a lot of stereotypes about my hair, I get a lot of stereotypes about what kind of music I like. It's never ending. It's something that is really challenging in my community that I work with. I do 5150 evaluations, so it's interesting because I don't get it from the people I'm evaluating, but from the doctors in the ER where I'm evaluating, I get them to ask to touch my hair, or they don't even ask, they'll just go in and touch my scalp. So it's never ending. It's something that I have to deal with on a daily basis. It's exhausting. I've deleted all my social media at this point because I just can't deal with all of the stuff that's going on. I hate when people ask me questions about, you know, how do you feel about this? And I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want to have to give an opinion about everything. Like, can I just process it, please? Like, this is too much. So it's really exhausting. Like, my racial battle fatigue is really real right now. I'm struggling with it. You know, I have to do a lot of self-care because I just feel like I'm very stereotyped at this moment in time, how our culture is. So it's something that, you know, I have to be aware of and, like, not jump on people. I'm irritated because of how a lot of people are perceiving me, but people are just coming to ask me how I'm doing, and it's not fair of me to jump on them because of how everyone else is treating me. So it's just something that I've had to, you know, reflect and process and be mindful of how I'm reacting to all of these stereotypes. So it's something that I deal with daily.
On that note, I feel like before I start about what I feel people have stereotyped me as, I think onto the last question, I could actually add that it's probably because I think one bias that I definitely have is when I see the average American, I expect them not to be accepting. So I think that's what happens after a certain time when you're stereotyped a lot, is that you start developing a bias against the average citizen. That when they smile at you, you're surprised. When they're mean to you, you're a little bit, you know, thrown back, like these people are actually aggressive. So, you know, I think what happens is that you start becoming a little stereotyped and you start assuming that people are not going to be accepting, that people are not going to know, people are going to be ignorant, you know, and I feel like that's changing though. You know, conversations like this make so many people, you know, at grocery stores and stuff have been so nice to me that I feel bad that I stereotype them to be people that would not be accepting of me. And I think that that was one thing that I really kind of changed in myself these last few years, is that I was like, no. I have to assume that people are going to be nice and that people are going to accept as soon as they know what I am about. So I think we all have that stereotype where we see someone and we have something in our mind, a little picture frame that we kind of put them in because of whatever our life experiences are, whatever people told us or what we grew up with around us. But I think the point is to ignore that, to try and still make a connection with that person on a personal level and know them through that. Know the individual, know what they identify as. And this is a great conversation to start that kind of thing. On that note, so with what I experience is, well, quite a few things. So people usually, when they see me, when I walk out into the street, they'll think a few things. They will not think I'm a born and raised American, which I am. I'm born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri. My parents, yes, they migrated from Pakistan, but I was born and raised here. So this is what I identify as. I grew up speaking English, you know, and when I open my mouth and when I start talking, and they see that I don't have an accent, that scares them, you know? Because in high school, I hung out with a whole bunch of people who were, you know, they freshly immigrated. So now all the people who were in my group, people would walk up to my high school, like, little circle, and they used to assume that the one person who will have an accent would be me, you know? And it would be the exact opposite. They all had an accent, you know, and we say accent, even though I have one too. But I had an American accent, and they were really, really surprised about that. So those are the kinds of things, I'll find people who, I go to the cash register and they'll speak super slow, like, slide the card. I'm like, yes, I know English, and there'll be like different things like that, and those things I feel like, because I've been wearing this for such a long time now, I started these things really slowly, and I think another stereotype that I face is people assume it's not a choice. People assume that you're forced. People assume that you're oppressed. And I feel like you have to get to know a person to know why they're wearing what they're wearing. Because it's such a big step here. I don't think anybody could be forced to wear this. And it would be really hard to be forced to wear something like this. We're not easily forced as Americans. We have grown up with the mentality of freedom. And so for someone to assume that me being in America and being forced to wear this, that would be the minority, not the majority. And so when they come up to me and they say things like that, I say, well, actually, my dad was quite against it, and they are really surprised to hear that. So those kind of things, they keep coming up. But I think what really kind of hits you is when someone comes up to you, they assume that, and then they don't give you the opportunity to speak against that. So when someone comes up to me and asks me a question, I feel it's so refreshing for me. Because I'm like, this is a person who wants to know, who's not willing to stay prejudiced, who's not willing to have that bias or to act on that bias without educating themselves at all. So that's when I feel so much better about myself. And there's so many things. And I think one of the biggest things that a person faces is when your own community tells you, you know what? Assimilate. Don't dress that way. Don't be different, because people are going to say so-and-so thing, or people are going to attack you, or people are going to hurt you, whether that's emotionally or mentally or physically, and that's something that hurts even more when your community tells you, stop being you, stop doing what you believe in, because people are not going to react nicely. And I think I want to have that assumption now that people will treat you nicely, people will be accepting, people will be willing to learn. And if I come with that positivity, I feel I'll get a better reaction.
Well, I'm going to focus in on the transgender aspect of my identity and the stereotypes that people have put on that part of our community. I get a lot of, like, you're confused, you don't know, it's hard to like, enunciate, like, the level of how they can think I'm confused when I'm living the life that I need to live. I get a lot of, you're lying, you're tricking us, you're not really a man, you're just a woman who, grew a beard, you're just lying about yourself. We get a lot of that, especially trans women, like just being part of the community. It's dangerous with trans women, even in the dating scene. They go out and then all of a sudden they're just like, oh, you're not a woman, you're just a man pretending to be a woman, and you trick me, and that's when the violence happens. And I feel that in myself too, like, dating was hard. I'm like, what am I going to do if somebody finds out that, I don't have stereotypical male genitalia? Am I going to be attacked all of a sudden? What's going to happen? If anybody finds out just in my daily life, am I going to be attacked because I'm suddenly different? They think that I'm something I'm not. So that a lot of the stereotypes are just like, you don't know who you are. I know who you are better than you know who you are. I had an issue with a doctor before who was just like, oh no, I'm going to put you on estrogen. And I'm just like, no, I need testosterone. What are you doing? People just trying to remove us a lot is the stereotype that I feel is most prominent. Like, that transgender shouldn't exist, that we're wrong, we're messed up. And, I wholeheartedly disagree, because I feel good. So.
I wanted to start by kind of going back to the previous panels. If you were here, one of the panelists up here mentioned that the picture of the Asian American male who had his tongue kind of pulled out and then nailed onto the table. When I heard that, so unfortunately I had missed the presentation when that was presented, but when I heard that, it felt like a light bulb went off for me, because I was able to connect with just the imagery that message had portrayed, and so I feel like stereotypes, for myself, against me circle more around the fact that, obviously the mono-minority myth, that all Asians are successful. But when you really look at the disaggregated data and you start to distinguish between Southeast Asian versus Asians from other parts of the country, you'll soon realize that that's not necessarily the case. And the big difference with that is, Southeast Asian males, I feel, they are the individuals being reflected within that image. We have our tongues out, and it's time to the point where we're not allowed or able to express ourselves. And I say that because I look around this room, and I'm one of maybe 2 Asian American males in this room. And when I see that, it kind of reaffirms that stereotype that we are kind of suppressed or not able to have a place to kind of share our feelings and kind of the challenges that we've had to overcome. And so the speakers really have echoed already a lot of, I think, the common stereotypes, but my focus primarily is within the Asian American community and specifically within the Hmong community. And I'm working on it myself, so I feel like I have to get to a point where I feel comfortable having these conversations before I can help to facilitate these conversations within my own community. So.
Thank you all for sharing. As you reflect on the stereotypes that you've shared about your own identity group, what are some of the experiences that you've had?
I actually have had a really good experience here at Fresno State. I've only gone here for my master's degree, but for the most part, it's been really and I was in the counseling department, so for the most part, counselors are pretty open to identifying the person rather than the stereotype. So I've literally stayed in Kremen for my master's degree. Since my doctoral program, I've kind of explored a little bit more on campus. I didn't know you guys had a bowling alley, which kind of blew my mind a little bit. But again, pretty much the overall experience on this campus has been great. Now, when I went to Northridge, I had no idea how much internalized oppression I had. How many stereotypes I had about Black people until I seen Black people of all different identities. It was amazing for me. I had to do so much reflection. I didn't even realize, I was stereotyping other Black people, other Black women. And then, I see all these different ones that do all these different things, skaters. I didn't even know that skating was a thing. We had, mountain climbers, everything I never even imagined. So there it was actually the opposite. It was me realizing my stereotypes that I had against or towards all these people who looks like me. So again, I don't know that I had too many stereotypes put on me at both of these campuses. I've had pretty good experience. Most of the stereotypes that I get are from people who I work with, educated people, people who take the time to get to know me for an individual don't really stereotype me. They ask me, questions, which is great. I don't like representing a whole group. I want to represent Tiffany. If you want to know my opinion, you should know, I have all these biases. It's going to go through all of these filters. And I'll give that to you, but I don't want to be, by any means, a representation of a population or a group.
I've had a really great experience on campus. I've had, people even the fact that people invited me to speak here was just, I thought that was a great experience. Being able to talk about these things is a great experience. I think the only things that really happen on campus that maybe I might feel are things that happen generally everywhere. People who don't want to meet your eyes. They don't want to make eye contact. And I sometimes I'm like, this part is covered, yes, but not this part, So it's make eye contact, have that communication. And I think that sometimes that's an issue that people have, is that they don't want to make eye contact. They are really scared of what's different. And, in general, and I think, out of politeness, people do have a tendency, don't look, don't stare, which is nice. But at the same time, I feel when you're having a conversation, please look, when they're right there in front of you, don't pretend they don't exist, say hi. And when I say hi, don't freak out, So, those kind of things, where classmates, we'd be sitting next to each other all year, and there will not be conversation if I don't initiate it, So it really, that kind of thing hits me. It's like, am I not a human being? If it was anyone else sitting here, would you have had a conversation with them? Would you have talked to them? And that kind of sometimes, would rub me the wrong way. But in general, I've had great experiences. There was one incident, I think, where there was a booth that we had to talk about, meet a Muslim, kind of break the stereotype. And that was, held by the MSA, the Muslim Student Association on campus. And I think I left to put coins in my parking meter, and I left my phone on the table. And although there was other people there, when I came back, someone had opened up the page for the elections and the voting that was going on, and showing that at that time Donald Trump was up in the game. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, I think I remember the first thing I said, and my friends started laughing, is I said, I'm really offended that you thought I couldn't be a Trump supporter, I just, those kind of things, they come and they talk about how, they want to put you in this bubble of people, they want to see you in that group because that's what they've always seen, and they're comfortable with believing everyone's the same. Because for them, it's harder to get to know everyone as an individual. Rather than that, it's easier for them to say, they're probably all the same. And so we probably should just deal with all of them the same way. But in general, again, I'm going to say my teachers have been so nice to me. And classmates have been, they have asked questions. They have been so accepting that I could not ask for a better place to be to get my education than a campus like Fresno State.
Yeah, I kind of echo that. Fresno State's been, pretty progressive, and for the most part, I felt safe enough on campus. I was privileged enough to come here with all of my documents legally changed. It says male on my birth certificate and my ID. My name is Jude on everything, that it says. So I didn't have to struggle like many other of my trans friends had, with the system and the names and having issues where, their birth name or their dead name, which the name they were assigned at birth, was being used more often than the name that they actually identified with. So I was lucky in that sense. I feel like if it didn't happen that way, I would probably be having more issues. But for the most part, just on campus, like I said, I've got the privilege of, my gender expression matches the way that I want people to perceive me. So for the most part, I can just kind of walk through campus without worry. However, there have been a few issues here and there, and definitely bathrooms are the biggest one. And I'm always going to talk about this until it gets fixed. I'm terrified of going into men's rooms. And I mean, it used to be a little bit easier for me, in certain times of the day when the bathrooms are pretty empty and stuff. But I can't use a urinal, I have to go into the stall. So I get kind of scared that guys are going to be oh, why are you using the stall just to pee? And then there's the whole difference in the sound of the stream thing. It's kind of TMI, but that literally scares me. Because there's a different sound that occurs, and I'm just sitting there slightly shaking if there's other people in the bathroom. Oh God, are they going to find out? Is this the day I get attacked? And I've had people be why are you using the stall? There's urinals right there. Other people need the stalls for others. And so I'm I can't use the urinals. And I'm afraid to say why, because if they're already being aggressive about me using a stall, if I say why I'm using the stall, that might escalate. So that's definitely something that I've come into contact with a few times. And then other things are kind of more a microaggression thing where I'm oh yeah, I'm trans. And they're just oh my God, I thought you were a real man. And I'm I am a real man though, but thanks? I don't know, it's hard to take that. But I do hear that on campus a lot. And I've heard it echoed by other trans people that they get that a lot as well. But aside from that, with the trans community becoming more and more active and more prominent in our society these more recent years, I think people are starting to learn more, learning that these terms are not really correct to say, oh, I thought you were a real blank, or assuming gender. I think we're getting there, but definitely bathroom issues, being afraid to use a gendered bathroom when I feel just an all-gender bathroom would be so much safer for me and a lot of students on campus. Kind of plug that a little bit. But aside from that, I do feel that Fresno State is definitely being progressive and they're trying. And I appreciate that, for sure.
I'm also going to echo what the panelists have mentioned already. For the most part, my undergraduate experience here at Fresno State has been one that's been relatively positive. But I'm sitting up here and I'm thinking to myself, this light bulb moment goes off where I'm sitting with someone who is representative of the transgender community, the Middle Eastern community, and the African American community, and I think to myself about all of the issues that I've heard in the past, since I've become conscious of these issues, and I can probably cite more issues that have risen within these subgroups than within my own group. So within the Asian American community. So, I ask you, when you think about the transgender community, when you think about the African American community, when you think about the Middle Eastern community, what are the issues that come up? And you could probably cite a few for yourselves. But when you think about the Asian American community, what comes up, right? And so I guess for myself, that's also an internal question that I'm having to figure out for myself as well too. And I think that within the Hmong community, and I'm speaking generally, but I think it's cultural assimilation. I think that is the stereotype that we are having to kind of cope with. That there is this generic understanding and expectation of what it means to be Asian, that we're high achievers, blessed with all these skills, and I think that mostly comes from the way that our parents have taught us kind of their humble beginnings, and so they're able to kind of teach those ways of being to us, and so that's a lot of what we do for them. And I think so when people see that, they kind of see the determination of Asian American students. But I think our struggles are more internal. It's about how do I assimilate, how do I be a part of this vast array of ethnic groups, because I don't really have an issue that that's being made aware of to myself, right? And so that's why again when I started this panel with the first question, I first identified myself as being Hmong and then American, and I think that comes from an internal struggle of how do you fit in within the larger context of what it means to be American when society doesn't really paint you as negatively as some of the other subgroups. And so for myself, I feel like this is definitely the beginning of a journey of getting to know and learn more about the communities that I coexist with, but at the same time also trying to strengthen my own understanding of some of the challenges that I'm going through as well too.
Thank you all for sharing. I have another question. So as many of you know, we have the exhibit Sorting Out Races here on the 3rd floor of the library. If you haven't had an opportunity to go and tour the exhibit, please do so. It's here on the 3rd floor. So we asked our panelists to be sure to go and tour the exhibit. And so my question is, what came up for you when you toured the exhibit and saw the artifacts and the images?
I have to be honest, I haven't actually had an opportunity to do that. I'm sorry, I came from Hanford this morning and I was a little late, so I didn't have an opportunity, so I'm sorry, I couldn't answer this question.
Okay.
But I will
Have
do
an
it afterwards,
opportunity
yes.
I literally had to do it just like a few moments before I came. So I'm not the greatest either about that. But when I went in there, I think one of the first things I noticed was there was an exhibit where Pocahontas was shown, and it kind of, a few things hit me. One was that sometimes people have good intentions with what they're doing for their media, or so-called good intentions, and then because they don't take the time to educate themselves, they end up doing something that could be offensive, or that could be taken as seriously offensive, in fact. So I think one big learning point would be learn, educate yourself, go to those people, go to those places, ask those people before you do something for them, which might just be against them. And for example, I could inform you right now, I'm technically not Arab. I'm not even from the Middle East. I'm from, I'd be considered more Asian because I'm from Pakistan, or my parents are from Pakistan. but identify more as American, right? And these kind of things. And so some people, when you look at Aladdin, and when I saw Jasmine and how they have some weird cross going there between Indian and Arab culture, which has gotten completely confused, and all those things were kind of hitting to me that this is what media is. So that was media of a certain time. Now we have media now. And, people we were talking about how we grow up with certain biases. Now we have a general bias, general stereotypes that are so much more far spread because of media, because of TV, because of phone, because of movies that we watch where every single show where a Muslim is in it has to be about NSA or some secret agency and how, you're always wondering whether or not that person is the criminal that they're looking for. And I'm like, okay, I guess it's a step to have Muslims in TV shows, but, maybe different kinds of TV shows would be nice, like everyday life kinds of TV shows. And, those kind of things, they really play a part in, because now when somebody comes out watching TV shows like that, they look at me and go, is this a good guy, the good guys or the bad guys? That's what's going through their head. Is this one I can trust or one I can't trust? And I feel like that's not usually a question that you have to ask about everyone, That's not usually immediately what you think about everyone. So I think you should automatically assume they're probably a good person. I think giving them the benefit of the doubt, be innocent before guilty. Nowadays it's become a really huge trend to label people as guilty before they prove themselves innocent. So, and I think that's something that we really, really need to work on. Look at someone and think, they're probably good citizens who wish well for everyone, rather than they probably don't like me, they probably want to attack me, they probably want to do such and such to me, which is just really a sad thing that you have to think that about someone else. So that's what I thought when I went in there, is when I saw all these stereotypical things that they would put in, they show Mexicans with cowboy hats and guns and whatnot, and I'm sitting there like, that's not who my friends are, that's not who that person, and I think that's one of the issues. We're not talking to those people, we're not having conversations with those people. People ask me all the time, how do I get to know what real Muslims are? How do I get to know what real Islam is? I say, go to the local mosque, talk to Muslims, find a Muslim, don't rely on what other people say about Muslims. Go to Muslims, talk to them, talk to your average person who's sitting here getting a degree, trying to get an education, trying to get by life, trying to live a happy life, So, talk to those people.
I really enjoyed the Sorting Out Race exhibit. It was really thought-provoking, for sure. When you go in, if you haven't gone in yet, the first thing you see is a little thrift store window, a storefront. And I love that you can actually go through the door, but it leads nowhere because you can actually just walk around the whole thing. It's really fun. I went through it anyways because it was interesting. But I went with a friend yesterday to check it out, and we were just having a conversation about everything that we were seeing, and then this I really liked the thrift store front and the whole idea of should when people donate to a thrift store, should the things be screened for because some stuff from the 30s or the 40s might have been put in there and they might be extremely racist, but do you let it through because that was just the time frame, or do you take it out because it's not correct to have those things anymore? And that was just super thought-provoking for me. And they had a wide array of things, and we were just talking about some of the things were definitely oh yeah, no, I wouldn't want that in circulation anymore. But then there's other things there's a Lilo and Stitch book, and I was like, well, I thought that they did really good research on that, on Hawaiian culture, and they actually talk to people from that culture to be as accurate. That was Disney when Disney was actually trying, But then they also did have the Pocahontas exhibit, and I was they tried, but they didn't really try as hard as they should have, kind of thing. And we were talking about that too. And then there's other things from specific cultures, and then the question comes up is it okay to have this here if it was made by that culture? Is it okay to have it there if it's just manufactured? And then who's going to be buying it and for what reasons? And that was just there's just so many different levels. It was really interesting and just so thought-provoking just thinking about that. Because, you know, I go to thrift stores all the time and I'm just like, oh, look at these cool, like, artifacts. And, like, I might not even think about where they come from. So, like, now next time I go, I'm going to be like, oh, what does this mean? What does, like, where is this coming from? Whose culture is it representing? Is it okay if I buy it, if I understand the culture, you know? It's very thought-provoking. And then, like, the rest of the exhibit, definitely focusing in on stereotypes. I mean, like, it's a lot of stuff I had learned in the past, but, like, just seeing it on display, it was very powerful. I liked the story numbers. Definitely go again.
Yeah, I thought it was actually a very, very clever idea. You know, because, you know, at thrift stores, all sorts of things come through. And so to really critically take a look at some of the artifacts and pull them out and turn them into an exhibit for the public to see, for myself, was a really eye-opening experience. And then, you know, when I came across the Pocahontas exhibit, that for me was kind of a reminder about, like, my first kind of misinterpretation of culture. And so seeing that was a reminder of at what point in my young life I kind of make that distinguishing between, you know, what is currently displayed or how it's portrayed in media versus really what was. And so thinking back to you know, conversations and comments that I heard about, oh, you know, Pocahontas maybe isn't really an accurate representation of what actually happened. That's really what stuck with me. And so, you know, if you haven't explored the exhibit, I definitely recommend you to as well. Lots of really great artifacts from a long time ago that you question. It's almost like, again, we're growing up in such a diverse community now that you almost feel like the artifacts are so foreign. Like, how did somebody actually come up with this kind of information? And so, again, definitely recommend you checking it out.
Thank you. Thank you for being just so open and willing to share and having the courage to just really go deep with those conversations. We really appreciate that. Okay, so at this time, I'd like to there's some questions and answers time, but let me start off with a definition, not the definition, okay, just some question and answer time for our panelists. All right, that's what we'll do. So we probably have a microphone somewhere here, but you are welcome. If you have a question you'd like to ask, come on up.
Hi, I was just wondering, do you think that having a bias is bad? Like, is it always bad to have them? I mean, sometimes they're actually visiting some sort of thing would be just to form of protection and security from something that has been recurring or has happened either to you, something else that you know. Like, so do you think it always has to be portrayed in a negative way?
That's a really great question. Actually, when I saw the question where they asked us if we had stereotypes and biases, that was the first thing that popped up in my head. Is it always bad? And I think the problem isn't really when you have a bias, because that generally happens. I mean, you generally grow up thinking, you know, you put people in kind of a frame, right? And the problem is, I mean, you will judge a book by its cover, right? You will do that because you see something and you have, you know, something, an experience or something you've seen that connects. And I think that's just being human. I think what the problem is when you act on that, when that comes out in your actions, when that influences the way that you're going to treat them, or it influences the way that you're going to talk about them, you know, behind their back. So it's one thing to have that in your mind, somewhere at the back of your mind where, you know what, you know, when you see a person like that, a little scared, a little intimidated, you know, or something like that. But when you go around and say things like that, you know, or you treat them in a way that's just super offensive, you know, that's when I think that's problematic. It's when you don't try to clear that in your head. And in general though, obviously, you know, you talk about, you know, the Asian community, you talk about anybody. There was the same issue with me growing up, actually. When I was growing up, I was assumed that because we came from a Pakistani family or whatnot, that we're going to be super smart and we're all going to be doctors and we're all going to be engineers. And, you know, people will, you know, have that bias when they see you. And I don't entirely blame them for the bias, but I'm happy when they actually come and ask. You know, again, like I told you, it's refreshing when they ask because that means they're trying to educate themselves. I'm not sure if biases are always wrong because it's kind of that assumption that sometimes there is kind of a similarity within a cohort group because of experiences. For example, if you all come from an immigrant mentality, you do usually come here with extremely, like very determined to do really well. And so that's what kind of creates those stereotypes. But it's when you just refuse to get to know people as individuals, when you let that influence the way you treat them, that's when it's bad. That's what I would say.
Can I add to that? So again, I don't think it's a question of bad, just to shadow what you were saying. I don't think it's a bad or good thing. I think it's more of a reflection thing about, you know, what does this mean about me? What does it say about the experiences that I've had in the past? So again, therapist. So a lot of reflection is needed when you have those biases and you realize them. So my thing when I get defensive, when someone is talking to me, so I have a thing with like ageism and being a young professional, I get asked all the time, like, how old are you? I was a children's therapist before. So everyone is always asking, you know, how old are you? Do you have kids of your own? And so I immediately get defensive because I like want to point to my master's degree and all the research that I've done on the past that proves that I am qualified to help you, right? But then when I start to reflect and it's like, what is this defensiveness coming from? You know, why is that such a problem for me? Why am I having these judgments about that person when really they're just asking me, are you qualified to help me? So it's just like going back and realizing, you know what? It's because of these experiences that I've had in the past that I'm making judgments on these people. So it's again, just self-reflection. It just tells you more about you. It doesn't mean that it's good or bad. It's just reflecting it. It's you're projecting those biases on other people.
I was just gonna add something. First of all, like everybody has biases anyway, so it's kind of hard to get away from that. But like the thing you said about like a defense mechanism, like I kind of really connected with that because that was like my main bias against cisgender men is a defense mechanism. But then at the same time, I feel if I continue to have this bias and like this, like almost an aversion just because I'm scared, then I'm denying myself the opportunity to meet some people that might be awesome, you know? So that's kind of the issue there. Like, yeah, it's for me to stay safe, but then I might lose out on some great friendship opportunities or great networking opportunities. So there's definitely like some give and take there.
No, you guys go.
Question? Hi, good morning. I'm thinking about the theme of intersectionality, and I really appreciate the experiences that you all have shared. I'm wondering, in terms of the intersection of your respective identities, who has served as allies to you? What groups or individuals?
So I am famous for having a white male speak and say all of the things that I want to say, but I don't feel will be respected coming from my aesthetic. So I have a specific friend who I just am like, can you just go here and say all of these things for me? Like literally just read all of this. And I just need like you to say it. Just how you look will be more respected coming from you. So just asking for those allies has been really beneficial for me and just getting my opinions across as a Black feminist. Which is kind of makes me angry. Like, why do I need that person that looks like that? When I am a Black female, why wouldn't it become as important as me telling you of all the problems that we face as Black females? But it's more respected coming from a white male. So I've had actually the benefit of using allies to get my messages across. So that has been my experience.
I think part of that is kind of comfort zone. So people generally, they'll be comfortable with a certain group of people. Like, even I think in general, you feel comfortable when you see another Muslim American. Like, I will feel comfortable if I see another Muslim American. You will feel comfortable when you see someone that comes kind of the same background, right? So there is a comfort zone to that, but at the same time, it's like, you know, again, you do feel like maybe I should be able to speak for myself, you know? And, but that's, I think, the greatest thing about having allies is because they can go to the people that are comfortable with them and say things about you and actually have them help make that connection, help them bring you back to actually have the conversation directly with you. and that should be the goal of those kind of interactions. When you have someone else speak on your behalf, the goal should be eventually they'll come and talk to you, and that's what, I think, and talking about the communities that have helped with us, actually we've had so much support from other faith groups. They have been so supportive. Other faith groups have allied with us in talking to, police officers, civil rights about, security issues and things about how we get pulled to the side in airports and things like that. And they have worked together with us. We're over here, I think we have in the Valley, we have a group called Faith in the Valley, an organization, and they all actually get together and they do things like that. And I think that I have gotten so much support, or at least, our community has gotten so much support that I can't even complain about that. We've had, the sick people come in and help us out because, some of the sick people are actually mistaken to be Muslim, and so they've actually, really worked with us as well. There's been so many groups that have worked with us, so it's really great to see that when you actually reach out and you say, hey, let's work together. I've never found anyone unwilling to this point, so that's what I would say about that.
I think a lot of my allyship that I've found has been on campus here. Once I learned about the Cross-Cultural and Gender Center and then later applied, I found a safe space. And I think that's the most important part is having these safe spaces available. I go in there and as far as I know, I'm the only open trans person working there, but I feel safe. Everybody knows, or almost everybody knows. And if they don't, I don't feel scared to tell them, and I know if I do that they'll be right there on my side. And I think that's just super important to have on campus is an area where anybody can go in there and feel supported, safe. I'll go in there some days and something will have happened. There was an issue some odd weeks back where somebody in the hallway was talking about transgender people in a negative light, and I had to step forward and address the issue because I'm not going to stand there and take it. And, I walk in and I'm just totally out of sorts and my supervisor comes in and she just immediately sees it. Oh, what happened? And having that support and being able to just be just talk about it, and know that it's safe, it's not going to be repeated, that my thoughts and my feelings are valid is great. And then also my boyfriend's hella super great now, right? Because he's cis, so he's one of the ones I'm not afraid of.
I think within my community, because it's not a common culture practice to kind of put yourself out there, and so I think where you find allies is within other people, other individuals that are going through kind of what was referenced up here, the same immigrant experience as you are. So those who come from very similar backgrounds as you, and they're striving for relatively the same thing, and so that I think gives and inspires you to kind of do the same as well. But I think once you step out of your comfort zone, you do come to realize that there are individuals out there that are willing to help you and to help you kind of achieve your mission and to become more an ally to one that you maybe did not think was an ally before. And so that's.
Thank you all. We'll have an opportunity for questions after. Our panelists will stay if you'd like to ask or share. But we'd like to invite Dr. Pilgrim to come and reflect with us on today's conversation. So Dr. David Pilgrim is the founder and director of the Jim Crow Museum, the nation's largest publicly accessible collection of racist objects, located at Ferris State University, where he serves as Vice President for Diversity and Inclusion. He is also the author of Understanding Jim Crow, Using Racist Memorabilia to Teach Tolerance and Promote Social Justice. His countless writings are used by scholars, students, and civil rights and human rights workers to better understand historical and contemporary expressions of racism. His writings, scholarly and creative, deal with multiculturalism and race relations. He has also been invited to deliver public lectures at dozens of institutions throughout the United States and Canada, challenging audiences to think deeply about diversity, inclusion, race, and race relations. Most recently, he also presented at the National Conference on Race and Ethnicity in American Higher Education. In 2004, Dr. Pilgrim produced with Clayton Rye, the documentary Jim Crow's Museum to explain his approach to battling racism. The film won several awards, including Best Documentary at 2004 Flint Film Festival. Jim Crow's Museum has shown nationally on PBS affiliates, including as part of the series The African Americans, Many Rivers to Cross. He also served as a consultant to Will Smith on UPN's All of Us. Dr. Pilgrim, an applied sociologist with a doctorate from The Ohio State University, and is a Ferris State University Distinguished Teacher. He has been interviewed by National Public Radio, Time Magazine, the British Broadcasting Corporation, and dozens of newspapers including the New York Times, Washington Post, Boston Globe, Chicago Tribune, and the Los Angeles Times. And now he's with us here at Fresno State, so please welcome, or help me in welcoming Dr. David Pilgrim.
Thank you very much. Just for the brief interruption, I'm Larry Salinas. I'm the Executive Director of Government Relations here at Fresno State, and I just wanted to, not a question, just wanted to say thank you to each of you. I've been here almost 9 months, and you remind us why we were here. And each of you had vulnerability. Each of you shared personal insight, and you educated us and enlightened us. I have a transgender daughter too, so I know what you're talking about. And then some I don't know, because it's a parental side that needs to understand. So I'm going to just say thank you for being here, for sharing your story. And by the way, I am going to the mosque across the street on Sunday, so I will take your advice. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Actually, I only have a couple things to say. Is this on? Can you hear me now? And one of the things I was going to say, you just stood up and said, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
But what it reminded me of was of how much talking administrators do and how little listening we do. And I just thought, 4 really bright, courageous, just great young people. And when you get my age, you start worrying about the world. And just listening to the 4 of you. So I'm the Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion at Ferris. I don't have a huge budget, but I'm pretty sure I could hire 2 of you. That's a joke. He's not laughing over there, but I would love to have you. I think any university would be pleased to have you there. I mean, just amazing. And like I said, as I was listening, I was thinking, I sit in meetings all day listening to folks my age pontificate about the nature of higher ed and the like. What we ought to be doing is shutting up. So anyway, I want to tell you a quick story, and then I'm going to let you go. In the late 1950s, there were a group of people, and I hate this word, by the way. There are a lot of words I hate, even though, as I explained last night, no words have any inherent meanings, only the meanings that we give to them. And yet, there are words that we give hateful meanings. One of those words is the word freak. That's what I refer to as the F word. I think in part, my dislike of the word is because one of the people who helped to rear me when I was growing up was a person who exhibited herself or was exhibited in circus sideshows. And so I have a great sensitivity to that word and what it means and the like. And actually my master's thesis was called Human Oddities, which, by the way, today would be a word I would not use or a phrase I would not use. But anyway, to make a long story short, in the 1990s, a group of people whose bodies were different. In some cases, they had hanging tumors from their faces. There were several who were conjoined, and in some cases, not in the traditional way. In other words, there was what was referred to in those days as a parasitic twin, an underdeveloped twin that was attached to the body. There were people who were small, what we would today refer to as little people. There were people who were tall. Pretty much the range of human physical expression. And in those days, you may or may not know this, but in those days there was an area of science to study people like that, and it was called, it's been so long, tautology. I'm getting messed up. But anyway, the translation was the study of monsters. Okay, so this is how far we've come. Anyway, in the 1950s, they decided, you know what, in the wintertime especially, we need to go to a place where people don't stare at us. We need to go to a place where we have the anonymity that others have. I mean, I can walk in most post offices and no one pays attention. I mean, Vermont maybe, but I mean, for most of America, it's a tough crowd, man. And so they created a town. And there is something beautiful about the human spirit, where they cleared the land. And they built homes that accommodated them, if that makes sense. And they built businesses that accommodated them, their size, the way they look, and the like. And it's got to make you feel good as a human, right? I mean, here are a group of people. We've all experienced discrimination, in some cases in brutal forms. But I dare say that they experienced it in ways that are different. Because at least for the most of us, no one questions whether we're monsters or not. Okay? They may in some instances question our humanity and they insult us, but that's another layer. So they built this community in Florida, Gibsonton. And right out in front of it, they put a sign. And you know what the sign said? Whites only. See, that's deep, isn't it? And that used to hurt me, that story. Because I've spent my whole life fighting all kinds of racism and social injustice and I'm thinking to myself, how in the heck could a group of people who've endured such brutal mistreatment, how could they buy into this? And then I thought to myself, they were raised in the same country I was. They had watched the same television shows, listened to the same radio shows, had the same material objects and the like. And so I shouldn't hold them to a standard any higher than I hold others. What I should understand is that bias on the one side and the pursuit of social justice on the other side, these are things we all do. So good luck to each of you. Stay in touch with me. And Big Rapids, by the way, in case you're wondering and decide that you are interested in a position there, and I'm looking at your eyes. Big Rapids is 1,500 miles north of Miami. I'll see you guys at 11. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. We invite you to the Satellite Student Union at 11:30. That's when the lunch will begin, so you'll have an opportunity to hear more from Dr. Pilgrim and also President Castro. He'll be sharing as well. So thank you all for being here, and thanks again to all of our panelists.